All right, everybody, good afternoon. Hope everything is going well. We have made it to yet another Friday. And on this particular Friday, we got an interesting bit of news concerning one of the Seahawks players. Talking about Dre'Mont Jones. And since it's a relatively quiet news day, I wanted to discuss this a little bit because I do find this interesting, and I know a lot of people are going to definitely feel some kind of way about this. So I've seen this from a few different sources now. I've seen it from Seattle on Tap. I've seen it from a couple other people on X as well. Not the big guns. I haven't seen it from Brady Henderson or Adam Schefter. Of course, they might not necessarily report on something like that since this is just a statement that Dre'Mont Jones's trainer made. But it does come from Dre'Mont Jones's trainer, so you would think that it's got some credibility to it. So, according to Dre'Mont Jones's trainer, he is preparing to play edge slash outside linebacker this year with the Seahawks. So, when the Seahawks signed Dre'Mont Jones, they primarily signed him to be an inside defensive end. So, when you're running the 3-4 defense, you've got the nose tackle, and then you've got two defensive ends. Sometimes they're called 4-eye defensive ends on either side of the nose tackle. That's where Dre'Mont Jones was initially imagined to largely play. Now, there's always been some degree of flexibility to Dre'Mont Jones's game with where he lines up, but that is where we envisioned using him. Now, many people know that last year, after the Seahawks lost Uchenna Nwosu to an injury, they ended up playing Dre'Mont Jones on the edge at outside linebacker a lot. And the results were not great. So I know people are probably going to see this and they're going to think to themselves, well, that's really not good. That's really concerning. So let's take a look at a few things here. Let's try to understand exactly what this means. On the surface level, this is definitely a way for Dre'Mont Jones to get on the field more because presumably he won't be only playing on the edge. You think about the way the team is built out right now. You've got Byron Murphy as one of your 4-eye defensive ends, and then you've got Leonard Williams as the other. And you're feeling pretty good about that. And Dre'Mont Jones presumably is like the first man off the bench. So he would play a good amount, but he wouldn't play a ton. Because you also have other guys that can rotate in off the bench. A guy like a Mike Morris, who I do suspect this team is relatively high on. So you take a look at edge, where you've got Nwosu, you've got Mafe, you've got Derek Hall, and you're not so sure if you're going to have too much of anything else when the season starts. I know some people will say Darrell Taylor, but I do kind of suspect that Darrell Taylor won't make the team because we need that $3.1 million that he frees up if we let him go. And he really hasn't played that well over the last year plus, I would say. So I still kind of expect Darrell Taylor to be something of a salary cap casualty. And if that's the case, then you need a fourth edge, and Dre'Mont Jones kind of becomes that guy. So you combine the snaps that he gets to play at edge with the snaps he gets to play on the defensive line, you've got a player who is playing a good amount and is able to make meaningful contributions to your team. Now, looking at Dre'Mont Jones last year, I pulled up his PFF page from last year. You can see that early in the year, if you go over to these defensive alignment snap counts, I'm going to try to zoom in a little bit, but that sometimes makes PFF look all weird. I think we're okay. You can see that early on, most of his snaps, in fact, a majority of his snaps were coming lined up as a defensive tackle, B gap. And then he would play a few snaps, a decent amount of snaps over the tackle, and then he'd play a few snaps a game outside the tackle. So there was a pretty clear plan with how we used him. And then after week 9, which was the Baltimore game, that debacle, everything flipped upside down. Starting from week 10, the Seahawks started to use Dre'Mont Jones mostly outside the tackle. In fact, it was like a light switch went off, and he barely was playing inside by the end of the season. You take a look at these snap numbers, it paints a very clear picture here. We played him on the outside constantly. There were games where he played more snaps outside the tackle than he did in the first 8 games of the season combined. So there was a very clear switch up, and it was mostly linked to the injury of Uchenna Nwosu, which forced us to require more snaps from him on the outside. So it didn't really work that well last year, admittedly, right? Because the defense didn't get better. His play, I think you could actually argue, was about the same, maybe a little bit better, but I don't think people were terribly happy with what they were seeing. And I can understand that. So I can definitely understand that some people are going to look at this and think it's bad news. But there's one thing that I want to point out with Dre'Mont Jones. Him playing different roles in a defense and mixing up where he comes at you from is not new. That is 100% something that he was doing in Denver, and it was something that he did a lot in Denver the year he broke out and ultimately got paid by the Seahawks. So let's go to his PFF page from 2022. So 2022, this is his final year in Denver. You can see that he's playing a good amount of snaps over the B gap inside the tackle. He's playing a lot of snaps over the tackle, and he's playing a lot of snaps outside the tackle. You have 200 snaps as a defensive tackle, 200 snaps outside the tackle, and then you have 300 snaps over the tackle. That is a pretty good mix of three different alignments that he was used in. He had one snap, by the way, as a nose tackle, which is just weird, but obviously doesn't really mean anything because it's just one time. So this was Dre'Mont Jones's best year. This was the year that got us to pay him $50 million. So Dre'Mont Jones being some one-dimensional player that can only do one thing, that's not the case. You go back to the previous year, 2021, in Denver, and you go over to his usage, and you can see that it was mostly he was being used as an interior lineman. 300 snaps as a defensive tackle, 250 snaps over the tackle, and then 58 outside. So this was a pretty good example of him not getting the opportunity to be truly flexible in terms of his all-around use. But again, this was 2021. This was not one of his best years. It was a good year. He played well overall. He did some good things, but you take a look at what he produced in 2021 compared to 2022. I think that moving him around and letting him do different things is beneficial to him. So what happened last year, I think there are a couple of things that need to be kept in mind here. For one, we bumped him over to edge because we had to. We basically moved him to edge because it was an emergency and we just needed somebody to play those snaps because the Nwosu injury happened. So that happens, and then you're basically going with it not because you wanted to. And I think that's the key distinction here. That's the key thing that needs to be understood. Whereas this time around, it's something that we're planning on doing well before the season starts. We're in May. We're not even halfway through May, and we're seeing indications that Dre'Mont Jones is preparing to play on the edge. So I look at that and I go, first of all, that means he has the opportunity to prepare for it. And second of all, it gives us the opportunity to plan for having it, which is not something we did last year because clearly the plan was to play him a large majority of the time on the inside because that's where we needed help that year. We thought we had the edge stuff under control, and then we didn't when Nwosu went down. So there's that, and then you have the other thing going on here where Dre'Mont Jones, he's currently listed on PFF at being about 281 pounds. That is very much undersized for a Mike McDonald 4-eye end. That is probably not what he wants. If you look at the defensive ends he had in Baltimore, they were all at least 300 pounds. They were all listed at 300 pounds at least anyway. So that seems to be his style. He likes the bigger guys on the defensive line. So Dre'Mont Jones at 281 playing as the 4-eye might just not be something that McDonald thinks will work, but he doesn't want to throw the player away because he believes the player is good. And he's also willing to live with him playing a little bit of 4-eye from time to time in the right situations, like maybe pass rush snaps, third down and long snaps. And we see big defensive ends have success. We see the bigger edge players, even in 3-4 defenses, work out well. That's what Darius Robinson could have been. A lot of Seahawks fans wanted us to take Darius Robinson. He would have been a big edge. He's about the same size as Dre'Mont Jones. You've got Jadeveon Clowney in Baltimore. He was a bigger guy, right? He's a bigger guy playing on the edge. He had a career year basically for Baltimore with Mike McDonald. So it can work. You just have to plan for it. You just have to prepare for it. You just have to understand exactly what you're getting into with it. So that's the latest. And I know some people are not going to like this very much, but again, I want to stress, it is very, very unlikely he will be playing all of his snaps on the edge. More than likely, he goes back and forth like he did with Denver in 2022, aligning in different places from snap to snap. And the fact that we're preparing for this early, rather than just throwing it in November, probably means it's going to work better. So let me know what you think about this one. I think it's pretty interesting. To me, Dre'Mont Jones needs to be used in a versatile role. He needs to be allowed to wear many different hats, moved around, and that's the key to getting a better season out of him in 2024. But I can understand that some people are going to think about last year. They're going to have reservations about it, which they should, but I think context matters. All right, I'll see you guys later. Go Hawks, and probably more rookie videos coming out tomorrow, and we'll get through the rest of this class before the weekend ends, I think.